Thank you for the kind introduction. So I am a researcher with Professor Isabel Welpe at the Chair of Strategy and Organization at the TU Munich, which is located in Munich, of course. And I will be talking about a taxonomy of decentralized autonomous organizations and an analysis of their success factors today. So what are DAOs? Well, decentralized autonomous organizations. Decentralized can mean that they are based on a public blockchain. They are decentralized on infrastructure level or decentralized on application level. So for this slide, I'm not using one particular definition for a DAO, but I just threw all definitions of a DAO together to just give you an idea what what those three words mean. Autonomous can be autonomous decision-making, autonomous execution, or just having a notary, predetermined voting rules, or transparency. So it can just be any combination to count as a DAO, which is not that easy nowadays since DAOs have a lot of different shapes. And well, if they're not that well defined, we need some clear scientific paths to analyze them. That's why we did this research. And organizations update on code through democratic voting. Smart contract code at the core. Code can be open source, can store value, can transact value, or reward externals for work. So since it's not really clear what a DAO is and what a DAO looks like, we formulated the research question that no one has ever looked empirically at how attributes of DAOs affect their success. This is relevant for any person or organization starting a DAO, but also researching a DAO, because more and more organizations, both new and established, will continue to launch DAOs, and scientists will look at them. Venture capitals will want to predict the success to make investments into DAOs. And we hypothesize that we can predict, or at least analyze, or if that doesn't work, explain the performance of a DAO by applying different frameworks for each type of DAO. And we like to measure its success precisely. And depending on the DAO type, we suggest that there are different success factors. I saw someone raised the hand, so I would suggest ask your question right away.
I think I just allowed you to open.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I was looking at the definition you provided, and I had a clarification question. Based on the definition you just showed us, would you consider Bitcoin to be a DAO? And if not, why not? It seems to tick all the boxes, but I'm not sure if you would consider Bitcoin to be a DAO. So if you could clarify that, that would be great. Thank you.
So if it is a DAO or not is kind of a philosophical question. I think Vitalik also discussed it in his blog. He might have a better answer for that. But if we look at DAOs in general, as on this slide here, then yes, it is a DAO. But you will see on the next few slides that we had to make limitations to be able to analyze DAOs as we know them. So I will continue here, and that may answer your question much better. So now that I've shown you what a DAO can be, I will show you what we have looked at. And here we adopted from Ricken et al. The definition that a DAO is a system in which storage and transaction of value and notary, so voting, functions can be designed, organized, recorded, and archived, and where data and actions are recorded and autonomously executed in a decentralized way. In this case here, Bitcoin is not a DAO anymore. But adding to that, we extend the definition for some maturity factors, because if you look in an organization that is like 2 to 3 people, then they might consider themselves DAOs, but we have no way of analyzing them. They are just so random, and therefore to make an analysis about DAOs, we extend the definitions and maturity factors. So we require an explicit notary, so voting process for each type of DAO, So we basically require processes. We require an organizational structure. So we say a DAO can't be a group of people that just use a multi-signature wallet without any formal procedure. And we require the DAO to have an ecosystem. So of course you can work for free for a DAO, but this is not viable. And this also prevents us from looking at more major DAOs. So here you can already see the limitations of our research before I even have shown it to you, that we can only look at DAOs that are somewhat mature and have processes. But for these, we can create a good taxonomy. So selecting the data. We took data from Asari, DeepDAO, and DAOlist, filtered it through the maturity factors in the scientific definition, and reached a data set of 102 organizations. And yeah, that were, for example, we reached 102 organizations, and then we had 72 DAOs left. And for those, we got their characteristics to build a taxonomy. We followed the Nickerson approach, where we create a taxonomy through those steps here. So basically, we determine a meta characteristic, where we used characteristics to distinguish different types of DAOs. We determine ending conditions. So when are we done creating the taxonomy? And it was when we have looked at enough DAOs and we did not add any more characteristics to the whole thing. So creating the taxonomy, there's two approaches. It can be either empirical to conceptual or conceptual to empirical. Empirical to conceptual basically means we look at a DAO, what it does, and then we conceptualize characteristics from that. Where the other approach is we think of a characteristic a DAO can have, for example, the treasury diversification or the membership access type. And then we find DAOs and their values for it to put it into the taxonomy. We do this over and over again until the ending conditions are met. And we validated the results using qualitative methods. So we ask a lot of experts if the taxonomy looks good to them, what they think about it, and if it meets the ending criteria. And we did that on 72 DAOs. This is the resulting taxonomy. Here you can, on the left side, there's three main pillars that we have found. It's treasury, governance, and community. Below those main pillars, we have subcategories. So community membership, community meta, governance token, governance process, governance voting, treasury meta, and treasury setup. And if we put the dimension with the super category and the subcategory, we reach community membership access, which can be open, token ownership, token staked, or invitation. In the little brackets within the characteristics, you can see how many of the DAOs had this characteristics. For example, you here can clearly see open is the most relevant one. So the communities for most DAOs that we looked at is open and not token gated or even token staked. We only found one that requires token stake to join their community. And here we have 20 dimensions in total, and the total data set is therefore somewhere around 1,500 data points for our analysis here. Looking through this, feel free to ask any question if some dimension is not clear to you, but with this thing here, we did a clustering to find out what types of DAOs there are, because on the internet you can find something like media DAO or video DAO or advertisement DAO, protocol DAO or operating system DAO. But we think this is not the way to characterize the DAOs, as we found out most of them work very similarly, even though they could be in completely different categories. So we looked at DAOs from an information system perspective and clustered the DAOs by their information systems values. So information system here means what do the processes that the DAO has do. So now you had enough time to looking at the taxonomy. You can skip here later if you have questions left. Applying the clustering. We performed an agglomerative clustering approach in our dataset. Agglomerative means hierarchical. So it just splits at the main values. For example, at every bar here, you can see that a value has been split, for example, between an open community and a community where the tokens are staked. And applying this, we reach 5 distinct clusters of DAOs. So not 13 or 20 that you might find on the internet, but merely 5 that, in our opinion, follow the same goals. This is important for further research, because if you know the common goals of a certain set of DAOs, you can analyze them much better. Because I argue that when you look at a community DAO like Friends with Benefits, it has much different goals than a DAO like BitDAO. So with our research, we wanted to show that you can't do analysis on DAOs in general, but have to first partition the DAOs into clusters that have the same goals to then come to conclusive results. So naming the clusters, we have it's basically 4 clusters, but the cluster analysis has shown that off-chain product and service DAOs can be with or without community focus. So one is with investor focus and one is with community focus. So that's a cluster. Then we have on-chain product and service DAOs. We have investment-focused DAOs and networking-focused community DAOs. And for each of those, I now present the predominant values of the clusters. So for example, cluster red, which means off-chain product and service DAOs with community focus, has in most of the cases, so the values you see here is the modus of the cluster for that value, has open access for the membership. The treasury setup for the initial airdrop is given. So a community-focused DAO, which has an off-chain product, uses airdrops to distribute the tokens initially. Whereas if you look at the yellow cluster with investor focus, they sell their tokens to make the initial token distribution. And yeah, then you also have the other values here. For example, cluster purple, which is networking focused community DAOs, use an allow list to restrict the proposal creation at the modus. But all other types use tokens owned. But also for governance, voting power, you have tokens owned for all types of DAOs. So there's to make a different type of DAO, you don't have to change too much of the core characteristics. Like if you use governance process execution, there is manual for 4 clusters, but only the green cluster, mainly on-chain product and service DAOs, uses an automatic execution process, and all others use manual processes. So you can, at these values, see what kind of characteristics they have at modus. Yes, please.
Oh, I just wanted to let you know we have a question.
Sure.
This is in writing, so I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, I don't have the chat open. Sorry.
So it's in the Q&A function. Well, Evangelos is asking, how robust are these clusters? Are other clustering algorithms finding the same clusters?
That is a very good question. So, of course, we performed the cluster metric analysis like Dunn index, the silhouette scores, the Davis-Baldwin scores. It's hard to judge, but the optimum for the clusters is between 5 and 8. So it's not 5 and 8 is set in stone. 0 to 4, probably not. Over 8, probably not. I can tell you with a big certainty that it's between 5 and 8. Then to validate this, so the scores were the best for 5 to 8, but now we had to decide how many clusters we took because the scores didn't tell us much more than 5 to 8. So we went to our experts and looked at the clusterings here. And we looked at how would another cluster change splittings. So instead of 5, we showed them pictures of this with 6, 7, and 8. And we carefully analyzed where it breaks. So for example, the first break is here in the red cluster. And we have determined that the first break in that cluster is not very useful because we looked at the DAOs again, and we concluded that they probably follow the same goals, which is the goal of our clustering. Therefore, we stuck at 5. But also one thing to notice, the split from 6 to 7 was much better. It was here on the right side where we have the investment-focused DAOs, and it split away Flamingo, the Lao, and sorry, it's Metacartel Ventures, Flamingo, and the Lao. And we found out that those are most likely private investment DAOs, and they had a small cluster of 3 DAOs. The issue with that is with our clustering metrics, that was, so we use the watt distance here. If we don't do the split from 5 to 6, we can't do the split from 6 to 7. So we couldn't do that split. We also performed k-means with a PC component analysis, which yielded bad results. I mean, k-means is used for numerical values, and it didn't work out because the distance between skipping here, we can't say what the distance between open, token ownership, token staked, and invitation is. We just don't know how to put the weights, and if we put a standard distance between each of those, it doesn't help us. So answering your questions, we are pretty certain that it's 5 to 8 clusters, but other than that, I can't give you a better answer. Yes, please.
One second, I need to enable JP2 to talk.
No issues.
There you are.
Thank you. Looking at the properties that you have included in the cluster analysis, I am wondering how you decided what should be in there and what shouldn't be. So for instance, whether a DAO is incorporated or not is not a feature. Whether it has a CEO or not is not a feature.
Yes.
It seems like it would be relevant to governance, or maybe even relevant to whether it's actually decentralized. So I was wondering why, for instance, you excluded those 2 features, but included, whether the type was, the supply was capped or not capped. Like, it's unclear to me how that relates to decentralization. And at the same time, having a CEO does not.
I actually have a very good answer for you for that one, which might be unexpected. We look at DAOs from an information system perspective. This is important to keep in mind. If you look from a lawyer's perspective, this might seem important, but our meta characteristic is to distinguish different types of DAOs that share the common goals. So if we say, is it incorporated or not? Do you think it changes anything regarding to the goals of the DAO? We don't think so. And that's why we checked every dimension for the meta characteristic to distinguish different types of DAOs. And that's why they are in here. Yeah.
Well, I understand. I would argue that having a CEO or not is an informational characteristic. A CEO does process information and distribute information within an organization. Yep. And being incorporated is essentially a legal statement of your mission. You can be a for-profit corporation or a not-for-profit corporation. But so being incorporated relates to your mission. But anyway, just a remark, food for thought. You don't have to spend more time on this.
no issues. So we do have to impose limitations on this. And we are also currently running an assessment study where we are putting all these values that you set in there to check if they make a difference for the performance of a DAO. We think for that analysis, it's very relevant for the dimensions we have here. For that meta characteristic, we don't think so, but yeah. Okay, then I will continue. I have read the question in the chat, but it's not really a question and I can't answer it, but thank you for the paper. So we have created a publication out of that. It's currently conditional accepted to the ISIS conference, and we can send this to you once it's fully accepted, so you can read through the whole methodology and better understand why we picked some dimensions and others not, and get really to the whole thought process in depth. Because we also know this is kind of controversial because you can think of a lot of dimensions, but in there you can find why we decided the way we did. Now to analyzing the success of DAOs. We now have 4 different, so this is further research we're currently conducting. So we have 4 different types of DAOs, and we are not splitting between the off-chain product DAOs and the on-chain product DAOs here. We probably will do that, but we'll see. For this, we use different research frameworks. For example, to analyze the success, we use the characteristics that we have presented here, but also assessment parameters in another research framework that has everything in it, from treasury size to how many people participate in the voting, how active is the community, where's the community. Then we look at tokenomics and emission models. How many percentage go to the team, how many percentage go to investors, etc. And then also the social graph. So who's behind the DAOs, how are they connected? Because at this point, we don't know too much about what predicts the success of DAOs. It could be any of those 4, and that's why we're looking at all directions. But the taxonomy was a starting point to get better results, I would say. Here are, for example, some key metrics we are using to determine the success of a DAO. So networking focused community DAOs want a large community on Twitter followers. Investment DAOs want a huge treasury size, investment returns. Off-chain product DAOs want ARR and monthly active users, and on-chain product DAOs just basically care about their token evaluation. And with these different success factors for every type of DAO, we might be able to get a clear picture of what influences what type of DAO the most. Here's an example analysis for tokenomics and emission models. So we have the independent variables, so allocation of governance token to users, the vesting, the team and employees, all those variables. And we also add control variables because certain times in the market are better than others. So if you start your DAO in a bull market, it's hard to compare to a DAO that starts in a bear market. And we need to figure out how to get that bias out of the modeling. And then the dependent variables for investment DAOs, treasury size. So we put these together and make an analysis. Issue here is also getting data, but Boardroom, for example, it has good APIs, also Messari. If you're doing this kind of research, definitely look into the Boardroom API, it's great. So here's just a slide how, for example, bear versus bull market. It's defined like this: if the price decreases or increases by 20% and the trend continues for 90 days, it's bear or bull market. So here you have a few. It's better displayed on that slide, where you have the top 20 DAOs put on a slide and markers for if they are in a bear or bull market. So our idea is to put the DAOs here into the chart and see if found it in bear or bull market, to use that as the control variable. But this is work in progress, but I really wanted to show it because it is really important to me. Next step would be putting normal coins over that and looking at if DAOs outperform Bitcoin, for example. But you can also already see it takes the downtrend together with Bitcoin. So here we had a very high and now we are pretty low. And for the industry impact, with that research, we could improve the scoring for DAO platforms. So there's currently a lot of platforms building on scoring protocols, scoring DAOs, and we want to help these developers build more educated platforms. Yeah, something along those lines. Okay, that's it for the presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot them at me.
Thank you very much, Christian, for this presentation. And I'm going to invite anyone to raise their hands or type in the chat if you have anything you would like to ask. This is a moment. So we have a question already. I don't know, Christian, if you can read it. I can also read it aloud for everyone to see. Jeremy's asking, for DAOs with decentralized governance, can you estimate the extent to which voters form their opinions independently? My hypothesis, a lot of votes exhibit herd behavior of token holders following the advice given on community calls organized by the DAO founders.
So we have not researched that, so I can only give you an educated guess. The truth in the current market is that the voting is not very decentralized, as there are a lot of whales that just have so much tokens that they can overturn any vote in any DAO, mostly. And the herd behavior may be true. If some whale comes and votes with 20% of all tokens, then the others don't even stand a chance to vote against it. So if I were to analyze this, I would also analyze the token distribution and how many tokens each voter contributes to the vote, and not just if they are following the vote.
All right, it seems that that's the last question we got. Luckily, we had plenty of questions during the presentation. So, oh, actually, there's a hand raised. I spoke too soon. There you go. Brigitte.
Hi. Yes, I was typing my question. So thank you. I'm curious whether in the research there was anything that came out about how voting works within a DAO and how it impacts on the success of the DAO. So I noticed that most of the DAOs seem to be based on the number of tokens that holders own. Sorry, their voting rights seem to be based on the number of tokens that somebody owns, but some of them are based on membership. And I run a DAO that is membership based, but I'm curious to know whether anything, just do you observed anything really as part of your research on that?
So here in governance voting power, you can see out of the 72 DAOs that we looked at, 60 were with tokens owned as voting power, 5 were per individual. So if you use a membership NFTs where everyone has one vote and is a doxed individual, this would be your category of DAO. And then we also have tokens staked as voting power. So you might know Curve, which has normal Curve tokens and V-Curve tokens, that's token staked. But your case is per individual, which is not that predominant yet. But it may also be biased because our dataset requires a DAO to be somewhat functional and pay their contributors, have formal voting, and that might have filtered out some of those DAOs.
So if I want to find out which 5 those are, can I do that through your paper?
Once we release the paper, we will have all the data accessible on our GitLab page. But we are currently waiting for the final confirmation from ISIS before we open source everything.
Great, thanks for sharing your presentation.
Wishes.
All right. I think that's it, Christian. So on behalf of UCL CBT, I want to thank you very much for this presentation. Also to all the attendees for this discussion. Great questions.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak here.
I hope it has been mutually beneficial to the participants.
Yeah, good questions, definitely.
Well, with that, I'm going to stop the recording now.